I didn't sign up for this, Ethan muttered under his breath as the storm of neon lights flickered across the palace hall. The wind howled through the open archways, carrying the scent of ozone and the faint hum of distant machinery. His black armor creaked as he adjusted the straps, scanning the corridor for any signs of movement. Queen Oralia's chambers loomed ahead, a structure of golden-hued metal and crystalline panels that caught every flicker of light, scattering it like a prism. The alarms had gone silent moments ago, but the tension in the air was thick enough to taste. Ethan's boots clicked against the polished floor, each step measured, each breath calculated. He reached the main door and paused, feeling the subtle vibration beneath his feet, the resonance of the palace settling around them. Oralia appeared, her towering figure silhouetted by the lights spilling from the chamber behind her. Her golden eyes studied him with a mix of curiosity and caution, hair cascading like molten copper, armor glinting with intricate patterns of overlapping scales. "You are the human assigned to protect me?" she asked, voice firm yet melodic. Ethan nodded, adjusting the communication panel on his wrist, letting the universal translator hum softly. "That's correct, Your Majesty. Ethan Parker. I'm here to make sure nothing happens to you." She stepped closer, the movement fluid, deliberate, her expression unreadable but commanding. The corridors seemed to shrink around them, the air tense with unspoken questions, the faint metallic scent of the palace mingling with the crispness of her aura. Ethan's eyes traced the contours of her armor, noting the subtle mechanical adjustments, the way it allowed mobility without compromising protection. He checked the readings on his visor, monitoring energy flows, structural integrity, and temperature differentials. "Everything's stable. I've heard stories about humans," Oralia continued, her voice softer now, almost intrigued. "Brave, persistent, and unexpectedly clever." Ethan allowed a small, professional smile. "We do our best," he replied. The sound of distant engines echoed through the high ceilings, vibrations resonating against the walls. Ethan's instincts sharpened. He felt the palace shift slightly, the subtle warning signs of something approaching. Oralia's eyes flicked toward the sound, pupils narrowing. "It seems our night is about to get interesting," she said, a hint of amusement threading through her tone. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his responsibility press down on him, not just as a guard, but as the only human between the Queen and whatever challenge was heading their way. Outside, the first flashes of light from the approaching fleet reflected off the palace spires, casting elongated shadows that danced across the floors. Ethan shifted, tightening his grip on the console panel embedded in his gauntlet, readying himself for the unknown. Oralia stepped forward, placing a hand briefly on the edge of the console, the gesture minimal yet commanding attention. "Ethan," she said quietly, "whatever happens, we face it together." He nodded, feeling a mixture of resolve and curiosity. The palace held its breath around them, every panel, every corridor, every shadow a participant in the unfolding night. And as the storm outside grew louder, swirling with color and sound, Ethan realized this assignment was far more than duty. It was the start of a bond that would challenge empires and shift destinies. The corridors of the palace stretched before Ethan Parker like a labyrinth of gold and crystal, every reflective surface catching the flickering light of the distant storm. He moved with careful precision, his boots making soft, deliberate sounds on the smooth floor, sensors scanning for irregularities in temperature and air pressure. Queen Oralia walked beside him, a calm yet commanding presence, her eyes constantly sweeping their surroundings with golden vigilance, every movement fluid and intentional, her armor catching the ambient light and scattering it into subtle prismatic reflections that danced across the walls. Ethan's mind raced through protocols and contingencies while trying to maintain a steady pace alongside her, noting the small gestures that revealed her thought processes, a slight tilt of the head, a measured pause, a subtle shift in weight that signaled her attention. The palace was alive with the hum of hidden machinery and distant turbines, faint vibrations resonating through the floors, echoing the tension in the air. A sudden shift in the lighting indicated the storm outside intensifying, the panels along the corridor glowing brighter with energy feedback. Oralia paused, her hand resting momentarily on the edge of a console, her expression unreadable, Yet Ethan sensed the weight of her thoughts pressing against the composure she displayed. "We will need to monitor the energy grids carefully," she said, voice steady but carrying a note of concern that only he could detect through the translator's subtle tonal adjustments. Ethan nodded, accessing his wrist panel and running diagnostics. The holographic interface projecting streams of data into the air, the colors shifting from green to yellow as the system detected minor fluctuations. "Everything appears within expected parameters, Your Majesty, but the turbulence outside is increasing," he replied, keeping his tone calm, precise, designed to reassure. Oralia's gaze met his for a moment, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, a shared understanding of the responsibility they bore together. They continued down the corridor, the palace stretching endlessly, illuminated by the storm beyond the walls, reflections bouncing across every surface, creating a kaleidoscope of shadows and light. Ethan adjusted the armored gauntlet over his wrist, making minor calibrations to the sensors, ensuring that even the smallest anomalies would trigger alerts, while Oralia moved with an almost hypnotic grace, her presence commanding the space around them without a single word. The tension mounted as the distant hum of engines approached, the palace vibrating in response, every panel and structural element resonating with the energy from outside. Ethan's breath was steady, measured, but inside his mind raced, calculating probabilities, anticipating the unknown. Oralia's hand briefly touched the console beside him, her movement slight but deliberate, a reminder of her presence and focus. "Ethan, make sure our path remains secure. I trust your judgment," she said, quietly, her voice carrying authority without a need for volume. He acknowledged, eyes scanning the corridors and the faint energy signatures flickering along the walls, noting the smallest deviations, ready to respond instantly. Outside, flashes of light from the storm illuminated the palace spires intermittently, casting dramatic shadows, while inside, the calm efficiency of their movements belied the intensity of the environment. Every step they took was measured, a dance of precision and awareness, both of them attuned to the rhythm of the palace, the storm, and each other. As they neared the central observation deck, the expanse of the empire spread before them, glittering under the tempest, and Ethan realized that this assignment was no longer just about protection. It was a convergence of trust, respect, and an unspoken bond forged in the quiet intensity of shared responsibility. The observation deck opened before Ethan Parker and Queen Oralia like a cathedral of light, the expanse of the empire stretching under the tempestuous sky beyond the reinforced glass panels. The storm outside cast streaks of color across the horizon, electric blues and fiery oranges reflecting in the mirrored floors, creating shifting patterns that danced across their faces. Ethan adjusted the calibration on his armored gloves, small holographic projections lighting up with data about energy readings, temperature differentials, and air currents. Oralia moved beside him with a fluid grace, eyes scanning the landscape, noting every detail with precision, her golden gaze catching every flicker of movement. "The sensors are picking up fluctuations near the eastern spire," Ethan reported, voice calm, even as the wind outside rattled the observation panels. Oralia nodded slightly, the movement almost imperceptible, yet he understood the weight behind it. "It is important that nothing disrupts the integrity of the palace," she replied, voice smooth but carrying authority. Ethan noted the subtle tension in the air, the quiet hum of power coursing through the structure, reinforcing the walls against the storm's energy. He moved closer to the central console, fingers gliding over touch-sensitive panels, sending small adjustments to maintain optimal stability. Oralia watched him, not speaking, but the faint curve of her lips hinted at approval. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the deck and throwing the palace into sharp contrast, shadows stretching across the walls. Ethan felt the subtle shift of air pressure, the vibrations under his boots, and the faint pulse of energy lines running through the structure. "We should check the auxiliary systems," he suggested, indicating the narrow service corridor along the perimeter of the deck. Oralia inclined her head, following his lead without a word, her presence commanding yet understated, a quiet partnership forming in the silence. They moved with synchronized steps, sensors projecting readouts into the air, the panels glowing softly in response to their adjustments. Ethan's mind tracked every data point, calculating, anticipating, aligning with the rhythm of the palace and the storm. Oralia's hand brushed briefly against a panel to stabilize herself, and Ethan caught the gesture, noting the human-like nuance of her interaction with the environment. The storm outside intensified, flashes illuminating the distant cityscape, towers rising like jagged teeth against the dark clouds. Ethan adjusted the pressure in his boots, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of the floor panels, while Oralia observed the reflections of the lightning in the energy conduits. "The palace responds well to your calibrations," she said finally, a rare note of personal acknowledgement threading her words. Ethan allowed a small nod, keeping his attention on the monitors, aware that the storm was only a precursor to larger challenges. Together, they traced the energy lines, aligned the sensors, and moved as one through the observation deck, a human and a queen connected by trust, skill, and the silent understanding that their actions in this moment would ripple far beyond the walls, shaping the events yet to come, a bond quietly forming amid the measured chaos of the storm. The auxiliary corridor curved around the outer edge of the palace like a silver ribbon suspended above the storm. Ethan Parker followed, the stream of diagnostic markers projected by his visor, each glowing symbol leading him deeper into the maintenance sector beneath the observation deck. The air felt cooler here. The polished grandeur of the royal halls gave way to exposed conduits, humming power relays, and walls lined with crystalline energy cells that pulsed with soft blue light. Behind him, Queen Oralia moved quietly through the narrow passage, her footsteps nearly silent despite her height. The distant sound of thunder rolled through the structure, vibrating faintly through the metal floor beneath their boots. Ethan stopped beside a junction panel and opened a holographic display. Rows of data flickered across the screen. Power consumption, atmospheric regulation, shield harmonics. Everything appeared normal at first glance. Then he noticed it. A tiny irregularity buried beneath thousands of lines of information. His eyes narrowed. "That is strange," he said quietly. Oralia stepped closer. "What is it?" Ethan enlarged the display. A cluster of energy transfers appeared along the palace network. Small, precise, hidden among routine operations. "Someone is redirecting power through secondary channels," he explained. "Not enough to trigger an alert, just enough to stay invisible." Oralia studied the display carefully. Her expression remained calm, but Ethan saw the slight tightening around her eyes. "Can the storm cause such readings?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "Not like this. Storm interference creates random fluctuations. This pattern is deliberate." Silence settled between them. Only the steady hum of the conduits filled the corridor. Outside, another flash of light illuminated the translucent sections of the wall, turning the entire passage silver for a brief moment. Oralia folded her arms thoughtfully. Very few individuals possess access to the palace network. Ethan glanced at her. "Do you trust all of them?" The question lingered in the air longer than either expected. The queen looked toward the glowing conduits stretching into the distance. "Trust is complicated when you rule an empire." Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he returned to the console and traced the energy route. The hidden transfers led toward the administrative wing on the upper levels. Not the military sector, not the engineering division, somewhere far closer to the center of government. His stomach tightened. "We should investigate," he said. Oralia nodded once. Together they continued through the corridor, following the trail of data deeper into the palace. The storm outside intensified, casting moving shadows across the walls. Yet Ethan found himself paying less attention to the weather and more attention to the woman beside him. Despite commanding billions across countless worlds, she had chosen to walk these maintenance corridors herself rather than delegate the task. There was no entourage, no advisors, no ceremony, just a queen and a human guard searching for answers. As they reached the next junction, the lights overhead flickered briefly. Only for a second, yet it was enough. Ethan immediately checked the readings. The hidden energy transfers had doubled. Oralia saw his expression change. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan stared at the display. The numbers continued climbing. Slowly, methodically, purposefully. He took a slow breath. Whoever is doing this just made their move. For the first time that night, The storm beyond the palace no longer felt like the greatest threat. Ethan stared at the rising energy readings while the corridor lights reflected across the crystal conduits surrounding them. The numbers climbed steadily now, no longer attempting to hide. Whoever had engineered the diversion wanted something inside the palace to activate, and they wanted it soon. A low vibration rolled through the structure. Not dangerous. Not yet. But enough to make Ethan feel it through the reinforced soles of his boots. He expanded the holographic map floating above his wrist. Thin streams of blue light traced their way through dozens of systems before converging toward a single destination deep within the administrative sector. There, he said quietly. Queen Oralia followed his gaze. The glowing marker pulsed like a heartbeat against the map. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The storm outside flashed through a nearby translucent wall, filling the corridor with silver light before fading again. That chamber belongs to the Imperial Council, Oralia finally said. Ethan looked at her. Then someone with very high clearance is involved. The Queen remained silent. Not because she disagreed. Because she already knew. They continued forward, following the energy trail through maintenance passages few citizens even knew existed. The palace felt different now. Less like a monument. More like a machine quietly preparing for something. The air carried the faint scent of heated circuitry. The walls hummed softly around them. Every system appeared normal on the surface. Yet underneath, hidden processes continued moving in perfect synchronization. Ethan had seen similar patterns before during security assignments on Earth. Problems rarely announced themselves. They grew quietly until suddenly everyone noticed at once. As they entered a small service platform overlooking the central government district, the entire capital appeared beneath them through a panoramic crystal wall. Thousands of towers glowed against the night. Transit lanes traced ribbons of light through the city. Despite the storm, life continued below. Citizens moved through markets. Cargo ships crossed the skyline. Millions trusted that the palace above them remained stable. Ethan wondered how many would be affected if it was not. Oralia stepped beside the glass. Her golden eyes reflected the city lights stretching for miles. When I was younger, I used to stand here for hours, she said softly. Ethan glanced toward her. The statement surprised him. It sounded less like a queen and more like a person remembering home. What were you looking for? He asked. A small smile appeared. Perspective. Another flash of lightning illuminated the city. An empire looks powerful from a throne. It looks fragile from up here. Ethan understood that feeling. Back on Earth, he had spent years protecting officials who believed power solved everything. Most had never realized how much depended on ordinary people simply doing the right thing every day. His wrist display suddenly emitted a soft alert. The hidden energy transfer had reached maximum capacity. Both of them looked down simultaneously. Then a new message appeared across the screen. No identification. No authorization code. Just a single sentence. Ethan felt his pulse slow as he read it. The message said, "The Queen must not attend tomorrow's council session, or everything changes." The message on the console lingered between them, glowing softly in the dim light of the service platform. Ethan Parker's gaze lingered on the words while Queen Oralia remained motionless, her posture rigid, yet he sensed a tension beneath the composure. "They want to prevent me from attending the council," she said finally, voice steady. But there was a subtle edge of concern. Ethan studied her expression, noting the slight narrowing of her eyes and the way her lips pressed together. "Then we need to act quickly," he replied, fingers dancing across the holographic interface, mapping alternative routes, emergency corridors, and hidden lifts. Oralia moved closer, scanning the readings with him, her presence grounding and focused, a silent reminder of the stakes at hand. Outside, the storm raged, casting streaks of flickering light across the crystalline walls, shadows stretching and twisting with each pulse of electricity. Ethan's sensors picked up micro-fluctuations in the palace's energy lines, tiny but precise, confirming the accuracy of the initial warning. "This is no ordinary sabotage," he said, eyes flicking over the data, noting the deliberate timing and distribution. Oralia's hand brushed against his arm, just enough for a human to feel the connection, but subtle enough to remain a professional gesture. "I understand," she said softly. "I need you to guide me. Your decisions in the next few minutes may determine the outcome." Ethan took a deep breath, absorbing the enormity of the responsibility, not just for the palace but for the queen herself. He rerouted auxiliary systems to create secure pathways, opened emergency bulkheads, and engaged safety protocols while explaining each step quietly. Oralia followed, moving with calculated grace, her eyes alert, noting every detail, trusting his judgment implicitly. Each hallway they passed revealed more of the palace's internal workings. Corridors of power that few outsiders ever saw, glowing conduits and energy cells casting ambient light in soft blues and golds. Ethan felt the weight of history around them, the decisions that had been made, the power contained within these walls, and the delicate balance that depended on both skill and trust. A flash of lightning outside illuminated the city below, a network of spires, towers, and transit lanes humming with life. Ethan traced the shadows, noting the reflections across the energy conduits, and adjusted the shields to prevent interference. Oralia observed quietly, occasionally offering a nod or a subtle adjustment to a control panel, her presence calm but commanding. The storm intensified, but inside, their focus remained unbroken. Every step they took, every system Ethan adjusted, brought them closer to a solution, a path where the queen could attend the council without alerting those who sought to interfere. In the silence between their movements, a bond of mutual respect and reliance formed, each aware that the choices made now would echo across the empire. And as the storm outside reached a crescendo, Ethan understood that this was more than a mission. It was a test of trust, precision, and the quiet courage that came from standing beside someone who had chosen to rely on him. The palace clocks marked the approach of dawn, though the storm outside concealed any sign of morning. Ethan Parker stood before a floating tactical display in a secluded operations chamber hidden beneath the eastern wing. Streams of data flowed through the air like rivers of light, crossing and reconnecting in thousands of patterns. Every route he examined led back to the same conclusion. Someone inside the highest levels of government had prepared an event for the council session. Not an accident, not a malfunction, a plan. The realization settled heavily in his mind. Across the room, Queen Oralia stood beside a panoramic crystal wall overlooking the sleeping capital. The city lights shimmered beneath layers of dark clouds. Cargo vessels drifted silently through designated flight lanes. Millions of citizens rested peacefully, unaware of the uncertainty unfolding. Above them, Ethan watched her reflection in the glass. For the first time since arriving at the palace, she looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. The burden of leadership seemed heavier in the quiet hours before dawn. "You should rest," he said. Oralia turned toward him and smiled faintly. "That sounds like an order." Ethan returned a small smile. "A recommendation." The queen stepped away from the window and approached the tactical display. Her golden eyes studied the data hovering above the console. "Tell me honestly," she said. "If you were in my position, would you attend the council session?" Ethan looked back at the projections. The warning message remained isolated in a secure file. The unexplained energy transfers had stopped an hour earlier. Whoever sent the message had already accomplished their objective. They wanted her uncertain. They wanted her questioning every decision. Ethan folded his arms. "If I stayed away, they would win without revealing themselves." Oralia nodded slowly. "And if I attend?" Ethan met her gaze. "Then we learn who is afraid of you being there." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind that existed between people beginning to trust each other. Outside, a distant flash illuminated the clouds. The crystal walls glowed silver before fading again. Oralia studied him carefully. Most advisors spend hours discussing strategy. You answer in seconds. Ethan shrugged. "I am not an advisor." "No," she said softly. "You are not." Something in her tone made him look away first. The moment passed as a new alert appeared on the console. Ethan immediately focused on the display. A secured communication channel had opened from the council chamber itself. Strange. The session would not begin for several more hours. He activated the feed. A holographic image materialized above the table. Empty seats surrounded a circular chamber of polished stone and glowing crystal. Everything appeared normal. Then Ethan noticed one detail. A chair had already been prepared at the center of the room. Not the queen's seat. A second chair, identical in design, positioned directly beside hers. Oralia stepped closer. Her expression shifted. Confusion first, then surprise. Ethan enlarged the image. An inscription glowed beneath the unfamiliar chair in ancient imperial script. The translation appeared automatically across his visor. Reserved for the chosen consort of the crown. The room fell silent. Ethan stared at the words. Then he slowly turned toward the queen. Oralia was already looking at him. Queen Oralia's eyes widened slightly as she looked at Ethan Parker, her golden gaze locking onto his with a clarity that left no room for doubt. The chamber before them, a circle of polished stone and crystal, seemed suspended in time, the storm outside muted by the reinforced walls. Ethan took a measured step forward, his boots silent against the smooth floor, and gestured toward the twin chairs, one of which had the inscription declaring it reserved for the chosen consort. This was not meant to be seen yet, Oralia said softly, her voice betraying a hint of wonder. Ethan examined the seating arrangement carefully, noting the intricate glyphs embedded in the crystal, the delicate runes that pulsed faintly with energy in response to their presence. It appears the council has made a decision without informing you, he observed, keeping his tone calm, neutral, yet alert. The queen moved closer to the holographic display hovering above the center of the room, her fingers tracing the projected layout of the council chamber, the motion precise, deliberate, revealing her intimate understanding of the palace architecture. A choice like this is not made lightly, she murmured, her eyes scanning the empty seats, the vast circle of authority waiting to be filled, yet somehow incomplete until the presence of the chosen consort. Ethan stood beside her, watching, noting the subtle shifts in her posture, the way her expression softened for the first time since he had arrived. The storm outside flickered in reflected light across the crystalline panels, casting a kaleidoscope of shadows across their faces. If you will trust me, Ethan said quietly, I can ensure your arrival is seamless. No one will question the order, and you will remain fully protected. Oralia turned her gaze to him, the faintest smile appearing at the corner of her lips, and for a moment, the weight of her empire seemed to rest lightly on his shoulders. And you are certain this will work? She asked, voice steady, eyes searching his. I will not fail, Ethan replied, his words deliberate, his posture unwavering. A subtle vibration ran through the floor beneath them, a reminder of the storm's energy and the palace's own power resonating together. Oralia nodded once, the gesture silent but laden with understanding, and together they moved toward the exit passage that would lead to the council chamber, each step measured, deliberate, and in perfect synchrony. The corridors beyond seemed to stretch endlessly, yet the bond between them grew with each passing moment, a quiet confidence forming in their shared understanding of purpose and trust. Outside, the storm continued to swirl, electric arcs lighting the night sky in violent beauty, yet inside, within the protective walls of the palace, two individuals, one human, one queen, moved forward with certainty, ready to face the unknown, aware that this moment would define not just the council session, but the course of the empire itself. And as they approached the threshold, both paused for a final breath, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, heavy with implication and promise. The doors of the council chamber opened without a sound. Warm golden light spilled across the polished floor as Queen Oralia and Ethan Parker stepped into the circular hall together. The storm that had dominated the night was fading beyond the crystal dome above, leaving only distant flashes along the horizon. Representatives from every sector of the empire filled the chamber. Their conversations stopped the moment they entered. Silence spread outward like a wave. Ethan felt hundreds of eyes settle on him. He was not royalty, not a noble, not a diplomat, just a human security officer standing beside the most powerful ruler in known space. Yet nobody looked away. Oralia walked forward with calm confidence. Her silver-gold armor reflected the light of the chamber, while the crystal floor mirrored every step. Ethan remained at her side until they reached the center platform. Then, both of them stopped before the two chairs. One belonged to the crown. The other remained empty. The inscription beneath it glowed softly. Chosen consort of the crown. A murmur spread through the council. Ethan expected confusion, debate, objections. Instead, he noticed something unexpected. Many members looked relieved, as though they had been waiting for this moment far longer than he realized. Oralia slowly turned toward the assembly, Her voice carried effortlessly through the chamber. For generations, this empire believed power alone created stability. The crystal walls amplified her words. We built fleets. We expanded borders. We measured worth through influence and authority. She paused. Her golden eyes moved across the room. And yet last night, when uncertainty entered this palace, it was not power that guided me. The chamber remained completely silent. Ethan felt his heartbeat against the inside of his armor. Oralia turned toward him. It was trust. The words seemed to settle over every person present. This human arrived here as a guard. Nothing more. A faint smile touched her lips. He had no ambition for status. No desire for influence. No interest in controlling outcomes. Ethan lowered his gaze slightly. The attention made him uncomfortable. He simply chose to do what was right when nobody was watching. Oralia stepped closer. In a galaxy obsessed with power, that is far rarer than greatness. The silence deepened. Then the queen placed her hand over the empty chair. Last night I was forced to make a choice. Her voice softened. Not between people. Not between worlds. Between fear and trust. She looked directly at Ethan. And I know my answer. Slowly, she activated the chair. Golden light flowed through the ancient crystal. The inscription brightened across the chamber floor. A collective breath seemed to leave the room at once. Ethan stared at the glowing seat, speechless. Oralia smiled. Not as a queen. As a woman who had finally found certainty. Outside, the clouds parted. Morning sunlight broke through the crystal dome for the first time, filling the chamber with warm light. The stars were no longer visible. Yet somehow Ethan thought of them anyway. Because for all the wonders he had seen across the galaxy, none felt more extraordinary than this moment. And as sunlight reflected in Oralia's eyes, the Empire watched something far more powerful than authority take shape. It watched trust become destiny.